This is an ACU Centre for Liturgy podcast. Speaking of liturgy. For Christians, the celebration of the liturgy embodies a response by both the head and the heart. Speaking of liturgy, Dr. Simone Brosig, Pastoral Leader for Community Life and Worship in the Archdiocese of Adelaide, Australia, describes how beauty and aesthetics express sacred realities in the liturgy.
I think the art of liturgy embodies the very human tension between head and heart. In our Archdiocese, some of the newly baptized were recently interviewed about their decision to become Christians. One said that initially it was the intellectual side of the faith journey that interested him. But then, he said, the beauty struck me. We can think and analyze and reason, but there is still something more that moves us. Faith and reason aren't incompatible, but they're also not the same. Faith works through more than our intellect. It works through the whole of who we are, which includes our senses, our cultures, and our emotions. Ours is a sacramental faith, which means sacred realities are expressed in a way that we can take in through the senses. And this is why beauty and aesthetics are such an important part of the liturgy. As we begin this podcast, I'd like to invite you to recall a time when you were moved by beauty in the liturgy. By beauty, it could be something visual, something to do with movement, sound, or fragrance. Try to identify what senses were engaged. How did that sensory experience enable you to enter into the prayer? And what did that experience reveal to you about the divine? Similarly, recall a time when you were displeased by sacred art. What senses were engaged? How did this sensory experience obstruct your prayer? When I first began to wrestle with this topic, two things came to mind. The maxim, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and the maxim, beauty is only skin deep. In both cases, beauty is presumed to be ephemeral, impermanent, biased, idiosyncratic, and fickle, the opposite of what we mean when speaking about God. There are also the opposite of what we're looking for when we're talking about liturgy, which uses outward signs precisely to communicate inward realities, what we know as sacramentality, and uses authenticity to facilitate the human encounter with divine truth, goodness, and beauty. These maxims don't seem to work when we speak about God as beauty, or if we're going to discuss beauty and the liturgy. This leaves us two questions. How do you measure or evaluate what is beautiful? And how does focusing on the material possibly lead us to the immaterial? Christian theology explains beauty as one of the principles of being, along with truth and goodness. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder presumes that beauty cannot be judged objectively because what appeals to one person may not appeal to another. Is beauty a matter of opinion? Or is it absolute, like truth and goodness? The same neophyte who was interviewed went on to say that as someone coming from the world of commerce and business, he understands how quickly ideologies and visions can fall to pieces. In our day and age, people are looking for something enduring, something eternal, something more than what meets the eye. And this is the art of liturgy. God is perfect, but we're not. And we're challenged to perceive this reality of God through our human senses. Beauty in worship aims to straddle both worlds, the human and the divine. Off the top of your head, bring to mind 3 examples of great beauty. Try to think what they have in common. My 3 all have the capacity to rouse emotion, elicit a response of empathy, and to move me. They're not superficial or skin deep. Also, in some way, they all point me to greater understanding of complex realities, and they call me to action. In this way, they lead me to God. Your examples may differ from mine, but does that mean beauty is subjective? The scholastic theologians of the Middle Ages focused their discussion on divine beauty. They offer little concerning the sensory quality that we mere humans contend with. In his Summa Theologica, St. Thomas Aquinas simply reports that we call things beautiful when they give pleasure upon being perceived. So what pleases us? It is God alone we are to worship and adore, but St. Thomas explains that we delight in what we recognize as our own kind, that is, something created by God. In order to consider something beautiful, we have to see God in it. People of every era and culture establish their own criteria for what is beautiful and what makes us desirable, worthy, or even lovable. Narrow standards and fickle trends ensure that the pursuit of beauty is constant and elusive. While the beauty industry wants to conceal our imperfections to make us lovable, the English author G.K. Chesterton sees decoration as a sign that we already are. Parents, he observes, do not put a bow on their baby because the child is otherwise ugly. Similarly, we don't give our beloved a necklace to hide the neck. He writes, "Decoration is not given to hide horrible things, but to decorate things already adorable." Human beings were created in God's image, and the Father sent the Son into the world out of love. Decoration, when it recognizes God's activity in creation, is an act of love through which we praise God and participate in the creative, loving work of the Trinity. What might seem like an excessive focus on the corporeal dimension of the human person is, in fact, particularly Christian. In his letter to artists, Pope John Paul II wrote that interest in the whole of human life is a reflection of God's esteem for humanity through the mystery of the Incarnation. In contrast to the maxim, beauty is only skin deep, liturgical beauty uses signs and symbols that can be detected or read by the bodily senses to facilitate an encounter with God, divine beauty. Beauty in the liturgy, then, is more than mere window dressing. In 987, Prince Vladimir of Kiev sent emissaries to find a new religion for his people. After experiencing the divine liturgy in Constantinople, the emissaries reported back saying, "We knew not whether we were in heaven or on earth, for on earth there is no such splendor or such beauty, and we are at a loss how to describe it. We only know that God dwells there among men, and their service is fairer than the ceremonies of other nations, for we cannot forget that beauty." It is this sensory experience of beauty that bridges heaven and earth and gives humanity a glimpse of the beatific vision when we will meet God face to face. Though objectively beautiful, God is more than what we can ever envisage. The Second Vatican Council's Constitution on the Sacred Liturgy considered the role of beauty in the sacred arts as distinct from what they called sumptuous display. On the one hand, sacred art is definitely more than skin deep, as it is meant to draw us towards God in truth and goodness. On the other hand, sacred art is meant to elicit love of God in creation, not adulation for its own sake. For this reason, the Church does not claim any one style of art over another as uniquely suitable for worship. A diversity of representation from different periods of history, regions, and cultures is needed to portray the infinite beauty of God. The Church even says that the art from today be given free scope as long as it adorns the sacred buildings and holy rites with due reverence and honor. So the Church invites us into a creative tension between what is transcendent and what is representative. In the same way that young people need role models that look like them, the sacred liturgy needs artists to faithfully portray the ways in which God continues to create and bless us through the lens of our own culture. Only beauty that represents and celebrates the wideness of God's creation will allow heaven and earth to meet, bringing the healing love of God into the world. Beauty is about human perception, not as a matter of opinion, but as our challenge to see and represent Christ among us. In the eye of the beholder, beauty is one way we can participate in the Trinitarian love of God on earth.
That was Dr. Simone Brosig with Beauty and Liturgy, an exploration of the significance of beauty and aesthetics in expressing sacred realities in the liturgy. The ACU Centre for Liturgy, which provides pastoral formation in liturgy across Australia and beyond, is pleased to provide this podcast, Speaking of Liturgy.